Show me you've even got $100 to your name, boy." The bills were already in the air when he said it. 20s and 50s and a couple of orange hundreds, and a fistful of loonies and toonies that a man had counted out at the counter of a Tim Hortons an hour before, all of it fanning out and drifting down onto the polished showroom floor of Meridian motorcars, under the front bumper of a car that cost more than most people on Lakeshore Road would make in 3 years. The coins hit last. They rolled. One toonie went spinning off toward the base of a display pedestal and lay there wobbling, gold and silver catching the pot lights, while 11 people stood around it and not one of them moved. Phones came up. That's the thing about this story, and it's the thing about our whole strange century. Before a single soul thought to speak, 4 different phones were already recording, held low against chests, tilted just so, because everybody knows now that the worst moment of somebody's life is content. And Chase Wexler, sales manager, 38 years old, tie a little too shiny, teeth a little too white, stood there with his arms folded and looked at the man in the salt-stained work boots, the way you'd look at slush tracked across a clean floor. Here is what Chase Wexler did not know. He did not know that the quiet man he'd just ordered onto his knees had signed his name 71 hours earlier to a document that made him the owner of that floor, that building, that car, and 21 other showrooms exactly like it stretched from Windsor to Ottawa. He did not know that the coins scattered around his loafers would end up costing him his job, his reputation, and something harder to name than either. He thought he was teaching a lesson. He was. Just not the one he had in mind. Let's go back 3 hours, because you should understand who was actually standing in that showroom, and why. Wesley Amanquah was 56 years old that November, and he had a corner office on the 11th floor of a glass tower in downtown Toronto with a view of the lake that most people only ever saw from a postcard. That morning, the desk in front of him was buried. Asset transfer schedules, lease assignments, environmental compliance filings for 22 properties, a folder marked legal, do not remove, that his lawyers had flagged in 3 colors. Trillium Holdings Group had closed on the dealership chain 3 days before, a deal that had taken 14 months and cost a number with a lot of zeros after it, and the ink was, as they say, still drying. His assistant knocked twice and leaned in. The press announcement was set for Thursday, she said. Communications wanted to know if he'd cut the ribbon at the Mississauga flagship or the Ottawa location. There'd be photographers, there'd be a little podium. "Cancel my afternoon," Wesley said. She blinked. She'd worked for him for 9 years and she knew that tone, but she asked anyway. "All of it. I'm going to Oakville." He was already reaching for the jacket on the back of his chair, not the wool topcoat. The canvas one, the color of a wet gravel road, with a tear at the left cuff he'd never bothered to fix, and a lining that smelled faintly of the garage where he'd rebuilt his first engines at 17. He pulled a toque out of the pocket. He kicked off the good shoes and laced up a pair of work boots that still had dried mud in the treads from a job site he'd walked that morning. Because Wesley Amanquah owned things now, but he had built things first, and the boots remembered. "Should I call ahead?" his assistant asked. "Let the Oakville GM know you're—" "No." He tugged the toque down over his ears. "That's the whole point. You've maybe heard of men like this and thought it was a made-up thing, a fable. It isn't. There are people who've climbed all the way up and never once forgotten the exact temperature of being looked at like you're nothing." Wesley had grown up in Scarborough, the son of a nurse from Kumasi and a mechanic from Halifax, and by the time he was 20, he'd been followed around enough stores by enough security guards to earn a doctorate in the subject. He'd learned that a man could dress like money or dress like nothing, and the world would tell you everything true about itself based on which one it thought you were. So no, he didn't drive the German sedan out to Oakville. He took the 10-year-old Honda with the coffee stain on the passenger seat. And on the way at a Tim Hortons off the QEW, he ordered a double-double and a plain bagel, and he paid with a 20 and dropped the change, a 5, some loonies, a couple of toonies, a handful of dimes and quarters, loose into his jacket pocket instead of his wallet, the way his father always had, so it jingled when he walked. He wasn't planning anything with it, it just landed there. Keep that in your mind, though. That pocketful of change is going to matter. The snow had started by the time he pulled into the Meridian motorcars lot, the first real snow of the season, big wet flakes coming down slow and disappearing the second they touched the wet asphalt. The building was beautiful. Glass and dark stone, the Mark's badge lit up in white against the gray afternoon, a row of six-figure machines lined up inside like sleeping animals. Wesley sat in the Honda for a minute and watched people through the window. A young woman at the reception desk. A salesman leaning against a car, laughing at something on his phone. The unhurried, oiled calm of a place where nobody was ever in a rush. Then he zipped his torn canvas jacket to the throat, and he went in. The warmth hit him first, and the smell. New leather, rubber, floor wax, and underneath it the burnt sugar smell of a coffee machine that cost $4,000. His boots left two dark prints of slush on the marble just inside the door, and he watched the young receptionist's eyes go straight to them. Her name was Nadia Kessler, and she was 24, and she'd been at Meridian for exactly 6 weeks. She'd taken the job because it paid better than the call center, and she was still at the stage where she wore her nicest blouse every single day and practiced the greeting in the mirror. She looked at the slush, and then she looked at Wesley's face, and this is important, so mark it. She smiled anyway. A real one. Hi there, welcome to Meridian. Cold out there, eh? Can I get you a coffee while you have a look around? I'm all right, thank you, Wesley said. Just came to see the coupe. The blue one in the window. Oh, she's gorgeous. Let me grab someone too. I've got it, Nadia. The voice came from behind her, and it came before the man, which tells you something about the man. Chase Wexler stepped out from the little glass office by the display floor, tucking his phone into his breast pocket, and he crossed the marble with the particular walk of somebody who has decided, in under 2 seconds and entirely from across a room, exactly how much a stranger is worth. He looked at the boots. He looked at the torn cuff, the toque, the coffee stain that wasn't even there but that he supplied in his imagination anyway. And he did the math the way his kind always does it, and he got a number, and the number was 0. "Help you find the washroom?" Chase said. It was a small thing. You could almost miss it, but Nadia caught it, and her smile went stiff at the corners. "I'm here for the coupe," Wesley said. "Easy as anything, the one in the window." Chase let a little laugh out through his nose. "That's a $240,000 car, my friend. I know what it costs. Do you?" "Not a question." Chase moved between Wesley and the car, casual, like he was just stretching his legs, but he was blocking a lane, and both of them knew it. "Look, I'm not trying to be a jerk here, but this isn't really a browsing kind of place, you follow me? People come in, they're serious. So unless there's a real conversation to have, I'd like to put a deposit down today," Wesley said. And something moved behind Chase Wexler's eyes. Not belief. Chase didn't believe it for a second. What moved was worse than disbelief. It was delight. Because a man like Chase doesn't get many chances at pure, uncut cruelty with a clean conscience. And here was one walking in off the street in muddy boots, practically gift-wrapped. Now, I want to stop the tape here for one moment, because you've met Chase Wexler before, haven't you? Maybe not this exact one, but the type. The type who's kind to the people above him and a boot to the people below, who mistakes the accident of never having been humiliated for the achievement of deserving respect. He'd been passed over for general manager twice. He'd told his wife both times it was politics. He drove a leased car he couldn't quite afford and parked it where the customers could see it. And every single day, some part of Chase Wexler went looking for a person he could stand on top of, just to feel tall. Most days he found one. Today, he thought he'd found one in a torn canvas jacket. Keep him in mind. We'll be checking back. "A deposit," Chase repeated, and he smiled, and it was the kind of smile that's really a door closing. "Sure, great. Tell you what, why don't we start real simple? Show me you can even afford the floor mats, and then we'll talk about the car, Chase." Nadia said it quietly from the desk. "Come on." He didn't even turn his head. "Do the filing, Nadia." The young woman's mouth closed. Her hands found the edge of the desk and held it. She was 6 weeks in, and she needed this job, and she'd already seen what Chase did to people who crossed him. And I'd like to tell you she vaulted the counter and set him straight, but she didn't. Not yet. And if you've ever needed a paycheck badly enough to swallow your own decency, you don't get to judge her. Wesley didn't. He caught her eye for half a second and gave her the smallest nod. "It's all right, I see you." There was a couple looking at an SUV over by the far wall, young, expensive coats, and they'd gone quiet and turned to watch. Near the front, by the glass doors, a security guard named Curtis Malloy had straightened up from his lean. Curtis was 51, 22 years on this earth as a black man in this country himself, and every muscle in his body had just gone tight because he knew exactly what he was watching. And he had a mortgage and a daughter in her first year at Western, and a manager he answered to who was standing right there. Hold on to Curtis. His moment is coming, and it's not the moment you'd want for yourself. Wesley reached into his jacket, slow, deliberate, the way you move when you know a room is looking for a reason, and he took out his wallet. Soft brown leather, worn pale at the fold. He set it on the little glass display counter beside the coupe. He never even got to open it. Chase's hand came down first. He picked the wallet up, and he flipped it open with his thumb like it was a menu, and he started counting out loud, sarcastic, performing for the couple by the SUV. Okay, let's see. 20, another 20, ooh, a 50, big spender. He fanned the cash. There was more in there than he expected, and for just a flicker something honest crossed his face. Confusion, the first small crack, and then he shoved it right back down under the sneer, because a man like that can't afford to be wrong in front of an audience. What is this, your rent money? You bring your whole life savings to look at a car you're never gonna. That's mine, Wesley said. Put it down. There was a folded sheet of paper behind the bills, tucked where the card sleeve was. Cream-colored, heavy stock. Chase's fingers found the edge of it and started to draw it out, and Wesley's hand came down over his, flat on the counter. Not a grab, not a strike, just wait. Just a big, calm, steady hand pressing a smaller, nervous one against cold glass. That's personal, Wesley said. For 1 second, the two of them were locked there, and the paper between them was the deed to Chase Wexler's whole world, though Chase would not understand that for another 20 minutes, and by then it would be far, far too late. Chase pulled his hand back. He was breathing a little quicker now, being touched, even that gently, even that much in the right. It had knocked something loose in him, and instead of stepping back the way a wiser man would, he did what small men do when they feel the ground shift. He reached for more. You know what? He picked up the fanned cash, the whole handful bills and the loose coins from Wesley's open wallet tray, and Wesley's own pocket change had spilled onto the counter too by now, loonies and toonies and a scatter of quarters. Chase gathered all of it up in one fist. I've been nice long enough. This is a place of business. It's not a shelter. And he opened his hand over the floor. You already know what happened because we started there. The bills drifting, the coins rolling, the toonie spinning to a stop against the display pedestal, the 4 phones, the 11 people, the silence that isn't peace, the silence of a whole room deciding all at once not to be involved. There, Chase said, and his voice filled the whole showroom now, loud and light, like he'd won something. You want to buy a car so bad? Get down on your knees and pick it up. Show us how bad you want it. Nobody breathed. And then somebody did. Absolutely not. The voice came from the SUV. It belonged to a woman named Miriam Faulkner, 69 years old, a retired grade 4 teacher from Burlington, who had come in with her daughter to look at something safe and reliable for the winter, and who had spent 41 years teaching children that you do not treat a human being like garbage. She was already on her feet. Her daughter had a hand on her sleeve, low and urgent. Mom, don't, and Miriam Faulkner shook it right off. You pick that up, she said, and she pointed one steady finger at Chase Wexler across the length of that gleaming floor. You threw it. You pick it up. I have never in my life seen anything so disgusting, and I taught in a schoolyard for 4 decades. What is wrong with you? I want you to know that mattered. It didn't stop what was coming. The machinery of what was coming was already moving. But for the man standing quiet in his torn jacket, being the only person in a room of 11 who mattered less than the furniture, it mattered enormously that one voice said no. Wesley would remember Miriam Faulkner's finger pointed across that floor for the rest of his life. Some of you watching have been in that showroom. Not that one, but that one. And you know the difference one voice makes. It doesn't fix it. It just reminds you you're still a person. Chase's face went red. Being questioned did to him what water does to grease. Ma'am, with respect, this doesn't concern. It concerns every person in this building, Miriam snapped. And that's when Nadia Kessler came around the desk. 6 weeks, nicest blouse, the job she needed. She walked out from behind that reception counter on legs that were shaking, and she got down. She got down on her own knees on that marble floor in front of everybody, and she started gathering the coins into her cupped palm. A toonie, a loonie, a quarter that had rolled under the coupe. She wasn't picking it up for Chase. She was picking it up so that Wesley wouldn't have to, and everybody in that room understood the difference, including Chase, and it made him furious. Nadia. His voice dropped, low and mean. Get up. Get up right now, or I swear to God you are done here. You hear me? Done. She looked up at him from the floor, and her eyes were wet, and she kept picking up the coins. Now watch Curtis Malloy. Chase turned to him, snapping his fingers in the air the way you'd call a dog. Curtis! Curtis! Get over here! This gentleman, he put a sneer around the word, is leaving. Walk him out. And here is the hardest part of the whole story, harder than the coins, and I'm not going to soften it for you. Curtis Malloy walked over. 22 years of knowing exactly precisely in his own bones what was happening on that floor, and he walked over, because a man with a daughter at Western and a boss with his finger on the button does the math too. Same math everybody does. And Curtis came up on Wesley's left shoulder, close, and said, "Low," not meeting his eyes. "Sir, I think it's time to go." Wesley looked at him, not angry. That's what Curtis would remember later, lying awake, that there was no anger in it at all, which was so much worse. Just a long, level, tired look. The look of one man who knows exactly what another man is choosing, and why, and how much it's going to cost him to have chosen it. "You know this is wrong," Wesley said to him quietly, just for the two of them. Curtis's jaw worked. He didn't answer. He couldn't. Wesley reached down. He picked up his own wallet off the floor where it had fallen. He picked up the single-folded cream-colored sheet of paper, dusted it against his thigh, and slid it back into his jacket. He left the cash and the coins where they lay, all except the ones already in Nadia's cupped, trembling hands. And then, instead of walking to the door, Wesley Amanqua pulled out one of the little leather chairs beside the coupe, and he sat down in it, and he folded his hands in his lap, and he said, in a voice you had to lean in to hear, "I'll wait. Wait." Chase barked out a laugh. Wait for what? For the person you actually work for. "Buddy, I'm the manager. There's nobody." "You have a regional director," Wesley said. "What's her name?" Something in the flat certainty of it made Chase hesitate, just a beat, before the sneer papered back over. "Frances Baudry runs the region. Go ahead. Call her. Call the Prime Minister while you're at it. You think anybody's going to take your word over mine? I've got 11 years in this chain. You've got mud on your boots." Wesley took out his phone. He didn't look up any number. He tapped a name he already had, and he held it to his ear, and the whole showroom watched him do it, because there is something about a calm man making a phone call in the middle of chaos that pulls every eye in the room. The line connected. Wesley spoke 6 words. "Frances. It's Wesley, Meridian, Oakville. Now." And he hung up. Chase snorted. "First name basis with the regional director." "Sure, and I'm the King of England." But over by the doors, Curtis Malloy had gone very, very still, because Curtis had heard that phone call. Not the words, the shape of it. There'd been no pleas in it. No explaining, no complaint, no anger. That was not the voice of a man reporting a problem to somebody above him. That was the voice of a man who was above everybody giving an instruction. Curtis had spent 22 years reading which voice was which. His stomach dropped straight through the marble. Chase didn't hear it. Or he heard it and his pride wouldn't let it land, which comes to the same thing. He turned back to Westley with the last of his swagger. "You've got 2 minutes to get off that chair and out that door, or I'm calling Halton Regional Police. The real police. Not your imaginary phone friend." Wesley folded his hands and looked at the snow coming down outside the big glass window and said nothing at all. 11 minutes. That's how long it took. 11 minutes of Chase pacing and muttering and telling the couple by the SUV that some people just don't understand how the world works. Of Nadia standing back behind her desk with a fist full of coins she didn't know what to do with. Of Miriam Faulkner refusing to sit back down, standing there in her winter coat like a sentry. 11 minutes. And then headlights swept across the wet glass too fast for the lot, and a dark SUV came in at an angle and stopped crooked across 2 spaces, and a door slammed, and heels came across the frozen pavement quick and hard, and the front door of Meridian Motorcars blew open on a gust of cold air and swirling snow. Frances Baudry came through it like a woman whose house was on fire. She was 54, sharp gray blazer under an open camel coat, reading glasses shoved up into her hair, and she was scanning the room before the door had even shut behind her. Chase straightened his tie. He knew Frances. She toured the region every quarter, signed his numbers, took him to lunch once at the steakhouse. He figured this was about a complaint. Some difficult customer had bothered corporate, and now there'd be a conversation, and Chase Wexler was very good at conversations. A little charm, a little spin. He'd smoothed things over with Gord Whitaker a dozen times. He stepped forward, hand half raised, the smile coming up. Francis, hey, listen, I can explain. We had a bit of a... She walked straight past him, didn't look at him, didn't slow. Walked right past his outstretched hand like it wasn't there. Past the coupe, across the marble, to the man in the torn canvas jacket, sitting quietly in the little leather chair. And the whole room watched the blood drain out of Chase Wexler's face as her expression changed. The rush, the fear of a complaint, all of it melting into something else, something closer to terror. The specific terror of a person who has just realized their boss walked in and saw exactly what they let happen on their watch. Mr. Amankwa, Francis Baudry said it loud enough for the marble to carry it into every corner. I am so sorry, I came as fast as I could. Mr. Amankwa. The name went across that showroom like a cold draft under a door. Mr. Who? Chase's voice cracked on the second word. Francis, who is this guy? Francis Baudry turned around and looked at Chase Wexler, and I want you to understand that in 26 years in the automotive business, she had never once looked at anybody the way she looked at him then. Chase, this is Wesley Amankwa. She let it sit for a second. She wanted every syllable to reach the back of the room. He is the founder and chairman of Trillium Holdings Group. Trillium closed on this entire dealership network on Friday. He owns this showroom. He owns the car you were standing in front of. He owns the 21 others just like it. He signed for all of it 3 days ago. The room did not gasp. It was worse than a gasp. It went dead. Completely, absolutely dead. The way a house goes dead when the hydro cuts out. Every little hum you never noticed suddenly gone, so the silence has a size to it. Chase looked at the boots, the toque, the torn cuff, the face of the man he'd called boy, the man he'd told to get on his knees, the man whose money was still lying scattered across the floor around his own polished loafers, not one coin touched, 11 minutes later, because nobody in that room had dared to. That's no, he said. That's not. You're messing with me. He laughed, and it came out broken. Francis, come on! Look at him! Look at what he's... Wesley Amankwa reached into his jacket and took out the folded cream-colored sheet of paper, the one Chase had tried to pull from his wallet, the one Wesley had covered with his own hand. He unfolded it slowly on his knee, and he turned it around, and he held it up so the couple could see, so Nadia could see, so Chase could see. Trillium Holdings Group black across the top in clean type. Below it, the acquisition terms, entity names, 22 property addresses in a neat column, and at the bottom in blue ink, a signature. I closed on this location Friday, Wesley said. His voice was precisely as quiet as it had been the entire afternoon. Not 1 degree louder for having the whole room now. I came out here today the way I come out to all of them, without the suit, without the phone call ahead. Because a spreadsheet can tell me a great many things about how a business runs. It can't tell me how a person gets treated in it when everyone thinks nobody who matters is watching. He looked down at the coins on the floor. The toonie against the pedestal, the loonie by the coupe's front tire, the quarters scattered like buckshot. Now I know. Chase's mouth opened and closed. His hands, the same hands that had thrown the money, hung useless at his sides. Francis Baudry stepped in close to him and dropped her voice, but not so far that it didn't carry. Did you throw this man's money on the floor? It was a misunderstanding, I thought. Did you tell him to get on his knees? Silence. There are 11 people in this room, Chase. Francis didn't blink. At least 4 of them were recording. So I'll ask you one time, did you tell Mr. Amankwa to get on his knees and pick money up off the floor, and did you call him what I think you called him? And here Wesley Amankwa stood up out of the little leather chair. He wasn't a large man, but there was something in the way he rose, unhurried, certain, like the floor itself had agreed to hold still for him, that made everything in the room seem smaller by comparison. He crossed the marble and stopped 3 feet from Chase, close enough to talk, far enough to let the distance say what it needed to say. You didn't disrespect the owner of this dealership, Wesley said. I need you to hear the difference because it's the whole thing. You disrespected a man you were certain had nothing and mattered to no one. That's who you actually are, Chase. The owner just happened to be standing inside him. Chase's chin trembled. He tried 3 times to speak and got nothing out but air. Mr. Amankwa, please. The words came in a rush when they finally came, tumbling, the way they always tumble when a man feels the ground going. If I'd known who you were, I swear to you, I never would have. I know, Wesley said, and it was almost gentle. That's the part I want you to understand before you leave. If you'd known who I was, You'd have smiled and pulled out a chair and asked how my drive-in was. And the next man who came through that door in muddy boots, the next one who looked like he had nothing, you'd have thrown his money on the floor instead. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry it turned out to be me. Nobody moved. Over by the SUV, Miriam Faulkner had one hand pressed to her chest. Frances already had her phone out. Chase, as of this moment, you are suspended without pay, pending investigation. I'll need your keys, your fob, and your credentials before you leave the building. Curtis will walk you out. Chase's head came up. Curtis? And he actually looked to the security guard, actually looked for an ally, for the man he'd snapped his fingers at 11 minutes ago. And Curtis Malloy looked back at him with a face like the side of a building. Whatever had been between them, boss and guard, small talk on slow Tuesdays, it was gone. It had burned up somewhere between the finger snap and the coins. Keys and fob, Chase, Frances said. Now. His hands were shaking as he unclipped them. Not the movie kind of shaking. The quiet kind where the fingers won't quite obey. He set them on the glass counter beside the coupe. He unpinned his name tag, Chase, sales manager, held it a second, looked at his own name like it belonged to somebody else, and laid it down next to the keys. Let's go, Chase, Curtis Malloy said, low. And he held one arm out toward the door, the same door Chase had ordered a man drag through 11 minutes before. At the threshold, Chase turned back one last time. 11 years, he said, and his voice broke clean in half. I gave this place 11 years. Wesley bent down. He picked one coin up off the floor. A single loonie, the loon on its face gone dull from 100,000 hands. He turned it over once, and he set it gently on the counter, right next to the name tag Chase Wexler would never wear again. You threw this at a man, Wesley said, and told him to kneel. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a choice. And every choice a person makes has a weight to it. You just found out what this one weighs. The glass door swung open. Cold air and wet snow blew in across the marble. Chase Wexler stepped out into it, and the door swung shut behind him with a soft, final click, and through the glass, they all watched him stand a moment in the falling snow in the middle of the lot, next to the leased car parked where the customers could see it, not moving, a man with nowhere left to be. Inside, nobody spoke. The only sound was the $4,000 coffee machine gurgling to itself in the corner. Then Wesley turned to Curtis Malloy, who had come back in and was standing near the doors with his hands clasped in front of him and his eyes on the floor. You knew, Wesley said. Not a question. Curtis's jaw tightened. Yes, sir. When he told you to walk me out, you came over anyway. Yes, sir. Barely a whisper. I've got a daughter at Western. He stopped. He'd heard how it sounded. That's no excuse. I know it's no excuse. It's a reason, Wesley said. It's just not a good enough one, and I think you already know that, or you wouldn't be looking at the floor. He waited until Curtis raised his eyes. They were red, not from crying, but from the effort of not. An order you know is wrong doesn't stop being wrong because the man giving it has a name tag. You knew what it was the second it left his mouth. I saw it in your shoulders. Yes, sir, I did. I'm not firing you. Wesley let that land. Watched the surprise move across the man's face. But I need you to carry this. Every day for a while, I need you to remember what it felt like to walk toward a man you knew hadn't done a thing to earn it. Because next time, and in a life this long there's always a next time, I need that memory to be louder than the mortgage. Can you do that? Curtis Malloy's throat moved. Yes, sir. I can. Wesley nodded once, not warm, not cold, honest. The nod of a man who believes in a second chance but has never once handed one out for free. Then he turned and he crossed the floor and he crouched down. Slow, one hand on his knee, the way you crouch when you've got 56 winters in you, and he began himself to gather the money off the marble, the scattered bills, the quarters, a dime that had rolled all the way to the base of the display pedestal. He did it without any show at all, just a man collecting what had been thrown. Nadia Kessler hurried over. Mr. Amanqua, please let me. I've already got some of it. And she opened her trembling hands to show him the coins she'd picked up on her knees. Wesley stood slowly, and he looked at what was in her cupped palms, and then he looked at her face. 6 weeks, the nicest blouse, the job she'd needed badly enough to keep and had risked anyway. And something in his own face went soft for the first time all afternoon. You got down on that floor, he said, when the person who ran this building told you it would cost you your job. Do you understand what you did? She shook her head. She couldn't speak. You were the only employee in this room who chose a stranger over a paycheck. He gently closed her fingers back over the coins. "I want you to keep those. And I want you to know that as of today, you don't work for anybody in this company who would ever ask you to make that choice again." She started to cry then, the quiet way, and she nodded, and she held his gaze, and in that look was the thing that had been missing from that showroom the entire snow-gray afternoon. Not vindication. Something better than vindication, hope. Wesley gathered the last of the bills and the coins. He counted them, right there, without hurrying, and it came to the exact amount he'd laid out that morning at the counter of a Tim Hortons off the QEW, right down to the loose change. Then he walked to the coffee station in the corner, where there was a little tip jar somebody had put out for the staff, half full of ones and fives, and he dropped every bill and every coin into it. The loonies and toonies rattled against the glass. 1 quarter spun a moment and went still. "That belongs to the people here who actually earned it," he said. The video was on the internet before Chase Wexler's leased car had even reached the QEW on-ramp. The couple by the SUV, the young man in the expensive coat, he'd filmed the whole thing, start to finish, 3 minutes and 52 seconds. From the moment Chase opened his fist over the floor to the moment Francis Baudry walked past him like he was a coat rack. Unedited. It didn't need editing. He posted it that night with 5 words. "This happened in Oakville today." By midnight, it had 250,000 views. By the time the plows went out the next morning, it had 6 million. And this being the country it is, it went a certain way that maybe it wouldn't have gone somewhere else. People were angry, yes, hot, immediate, the good kind of angry. But they were also, a lot of them, ashamed, because a nation that likes to tell itself it's the polite one had just watched 10 of its own people stand in a room and film a man's dignity hitting the floor, and not one of the 10 set down the phone to help. Only 2 people in that whole room came out of it clean, and everybody watching knew their names by the next afternoon. The retired teacher who wouldn't sit down, and the girl at the front desk who got on her knees. Somebody started the hashtag. Pick It Up Canada, it was, and it ran for 8 straight days, and under it came the flood. Thousands of them, tens of thousands, black Canadians describing the exact afternoon they'd been followed through a store, waved off at a counter, asked to prove they belonged in a room they'd every right to stand in. Each one different, each one the same. Then a journalist got hold of it. Renee Charbonneau, an investigative reporter out of a Toronto newsroom, mid-40s, the kind who makes phone calls that make people sweat. She saw the video like everybody else. Unlike everybody else, she started digging. And what Renee Charbonneau found was so much worse than one bad afternoon in the snow. She pulled records. She talked to former staff, 3 salespeople, a detailer, a receptionist who'd lasted 5 weeks before Chase Wexler drove her out. And piece by piece, a pattern came up out of the ground, the way they always do once somebody finally starts turning the soil. 4 formal complaints against Chase Wexler in 6 years. 4. All of them from black customers or black staff. All of them documented, dated, witnessed. And every single one of them had died on the same desk. The desk of the district manager, a man named Gord Whitaker, who golfed with Chase in the summer and had a standing table with him at the same steakhouse Francis took people to. When those complaints reached Gord Whitaker made them go away. One had been marked resolved with no interview and no follow-up. One had simply been deleted out of the system entirely. Renee's team recovered it off a backup server. The customer who'd filed it had phoned twice to ask what happened. Nobody ever called him back. Renee Charbonneau put all of it on the air. The recovered files, the timestamps. One internal email from Gord Whitaker to Chase, sent the night after the second complaint, landed. That read in full, handled. Don't sweat it. 3 words and a signature. A man's grievance, erased between the salad and the steak. Trillium Holdings released a statement within hours of the broadcast, and it had Wesley Amanqua's fingerprints all over it, because he'd written it himself at his kitchen table at 11 at night. What happened at Meridian Oakville was not one man having a bad day, it said. It was the predictable result of a system that let cruelty hide, complaints vanish, and the people responsible answer to no one. That system dies today. Chase Wexler was terminated for cause that same afternoon. Gord Whitaker was gone within 2 weeks, his name in Renee Charbonneau's follow-up piece, right beside the emails he'd thought no one would ever read. The 4 original complainants were found and re-interviewed, and the company's lawyers reached each of them privately. The terms stayed sealed, But Renee reported that the figures reflected not just what had been done, but all the years of being told, gently, in a dozen small ways, that it hadn't happened. And Wesley didn't stop there. Every location in the network got the same three things, non-negotiable. An anonymous reporting line that rang through to an outside board, not to any manager, not to any Gord Whitaker. Real anti-bias and de-escalation training, not a lunch-hour slideshow but a 12-week program with facilitators from outside the company. And a small brass plaque bolted up by the front doors of all 22 showrooms that read, "Every person who walks through this door deserves dignity. If you are ever offered less or watch it happen, call this number." And below it, a line that went nowhere near the sales floor. As for Chase Wexler, no, he didn't go to jail. This was never that kind of story. But his name is welded to those 3 minutes and 52 seconds now for good. Search it, and that's what comes up. First result, forever. He deleted every account he had inside 48 hours. It didn't matter. The internet had already saved all of it. The world he'd built. The 11 years, the name tag, the little glass office, the finger he could snap to make a bigger man come running, was gone, not because he insulted the wrong person, because for once, the right person had the standing to make it stop. 6 weeks later, Wesley Amanqua pulled the 10-year-old Honda into the lot at Meridian Motor Cars. Same spot, same gray November light, though the snow had settled in properly now and the plows had left the banks along the edges. He'd traded nothing. Same torn canvas jacket, same toque, same boots with the mud gone dark and dry in the treads. There was a little bell over the door now, that was new. It chimed when he pushed inside, and the warmth and the leather smell came up to meet him just like before. And behind the reception desk, a young man he didn't recognize looked up with an easy smile and said, "Afternoon, welcome to Meridian, cold enough for you? Grab you a coffee?" No glance at the boots, no pause. No math being done behind the eyes, just a man being welcomed into a warm room on a cold day. "I'm all right, thanks," Wesley said. "Just looking for whoever's running the floor. That'd be our new manager. Let me get her for you." And she came around the corner from the glass office wiping her hands on a cloth, and her name tag was different now. Nadia Kessler, sales manager. She saw him, and for a second her whole face did something complicated. Surprise, and then recognition, and then a warmth that came from somewhere deep. And under all of it, the ghost of an afternoon she probably still ran through her head some nights before she fell asleep. "Mr. Amanqua." She smiled. A real one, the same real one she'd given a stranger in muddy boots 6 weeks before. "Come to see the coupe. Came to see how the floor's running." He looked around, the couple with the stroller by the SUV. A father and a teenage kid circling a sedan, the kid's hand hovering just off the paint. An older man reading the paper in one of the leather chairs. There was a hum to the room that hadn't been there in November. The hum a place gets when the people in it feel safe. "How's the team?" "Good," Nadia said, and she meant it. "Really good. The training, everybody figured it'd be some corporate box to tick, and then the outside people showed up and they were the real thing. A couple of the guys in service said it was the first time in years anybody from up top asked them how they were actually doing." She hesitated. "Curtis is still with us. He's the one who takes the new hires through the door on their first day. Tells them the story every time. I think he's told it more than I have. And the line? 2 calls the first month, both handled inside a week. Nothing buried, nothing lost." She said it simply, but you could hear underneath it what it cost her to be able to say it. Wesley nodded. He walked over to the coffee station in the corner, and the little tip jar was still sitting there, half full, and beside it, he stopped when he saw it. Beside it, mounted in a small frame she'd bought herself, was a single loonie. Just one. The loon gone dull from 100,000 hands. "You kept it," he said. "Every new person asks about it." Nadia came and stood beside him. "So I get to tell them what it's for. That seemed better than spending it." Wesley Amanqua looked at that one dull coin in its frame for a long moment. Then he took a 20 out of his wallet, laid it flat on the counter beside the jar, and tipped his toque back an inch. "Keep the change," he said. Nadia laughed. "The kind that comes out before you can stop it, carrying 6 weeks of everything with it." And outside the big glass window, the snow kept coming down slow and steady over the QEW and the gray lake beyond it. Not caring in the least what had happened in that room, the way snow never does. He tipped his cap to her, and to the young man at the desk, and to Curtis Malloy raising 2 fingers from over by the door, and he went out past the little brass plaque, bolted up at eye level. He stopped there a second, The way he'd stopped that first afternoon before he ever walked in. He read it through once. He ran his thumb across the raised letters. Every person who walks through this door deserves dignity. And then he got into a 10-year-old Honda in a lot full of machines he owned, and he drove off into the snow. So let me leave you with the only question that ever really mattered here. And I want you to sit with it honestly. The way you'd sit with it at 3 in the morning when there's nobody around to perform for. If you'd been in that showroom that afternoon, phone already halfway out of your pocket, 10 other people frozen in their coats, a man being told to get down on his knees over a little pile of coins on a cold marble floor, which one would you have been? The teacher who stood up, the girl who knelt, or one of the 9 who watched? Because I think, in the end, that's the only thing any of this was ever really about. Not the money, not the man's name, just that, which one of the 11 you'd have been.